Do you know? By 1952, just 7 years after being bombed into ruins, Japan had started rebuilding its economy and laying the foundation for what would become one of the fastest growing economies in the world. That's not just a recovery, that's a rebirth. And surprisingly, a big part of that success came from the same country that dropped the bombs. It sounds crazy, right? America destroyed Japan with 2 nuclear bombs in 1945. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were turned into ash, families broken, and cities vanished. But then, almost immediately, the same America started pouring money, technology, and resources into Japan. Why? Was it guilt, strategy, or a bigger plan? Most people only know the destruction part of the story. But the real twist is what happened after. How the US quietly shaped Japan's future, built its economy, protected it, and even used it as a chess piece in a larger global game. In today's video, we are diving deep into why the US funded Japan's future, the politics, the power play, and the secrets behind this unexpected partnership. To understand why America helped Japan, we have to go back to the moment everything fell apart. After Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, the country was shattered. Cities were burned to the ground, factories were in rubble, people were starving, and millions were jobless. It wasn't just defeat, it was total collapse. That's when the Allied forces stepped in, led by US General Douglas MacArthur. He was called SCAP, Supreme Commander for the Allied powers. Now here's the twist. Instead of just punishing Japan, the US chose to rebuild it. From 1945 to 1947, America's first steps were focused on 2 things: demilitarization and democratization. The Japanese army was completely shut down. War crime trials were held. A brand new constitution was written. This included Article 9, which basically banned Japan from ever going to war again. Women were finally given the right to vote. America also broke apart the big family-run companies known as zaibatsu, which had too much power before the war. The idea was to make the economy fairer and stop any one group from controlling it all. It was clear. America wasn't just helping, it was reshaping Japan from the ground up. But things didn't stay the same for long. By 1947, the world was changing fast, and so was America's mindset. The Cold War had started to heat up. Communism was spreading in China, creeping into Europe, and making Washington nervous. The US looked at Japan and thought, if we leave Japan weak and unstable, it might turn to communism too. That's when everything flipped, from punishing Japan to protecting it. This major policy shift became known as the reverse course. Instead of tearing Japan down, America started building it up. Turned Japan into a stable, successful economy that could stand strong against communist influence and work as a reliable US ally in Asia. This was no longer just about helping Japan. It was about winning a bigger global game. But rebuilding a country isn't just about changing policies. It's also about fixing the economy at its core. By 1949, Japan was still struggling with serious economic problems. Prices were rising, the yen was weak, and inflation was getting out of control. That's when the US sent in a man named Joseph Dodge, a tough American banker with one mission: clean up the mess. He introduced what's now called the Dodge Plan or the Dodge Line. This plan focused on strict economic discipline. Dodge balanced Japan's national budget, fixed the yen at 360 yen to $1, cut unnecessary government spending, and tightened up tax collection. At first, it felt brutal. Unemployment went up, wages dropped, and people struggled. But in the long run, it worked. Now, economic plans like the Dodge Line gave Japan structure. But structure alone doesn't rebuild a nation. For real progress, Japan needed fuel. And that's where America stepped in again. From 1945 to 1952, the US gave Japan about $2 billion in aid. That's around $23 billion in today's money. This support came through programs like GARIOA and EROA. And this wasn't just pocket money. 15% of Japan's imports and 4% of its entire GDP came from this aid. America sent food, industrial materials, transportation equipment, and urgent emergency relief. That aid stopped famine in its tracks, kept people fed, and gave Japanese industries the raw materials they desperately needed to get back on their feet. It wasn't charity, it was strategy. But just when Japan was starting to find its balance, something unexpected gave its economy a serious push forward. In 1950, the Korean War broke out, and suddenly, Japan's location became a major advantage. The US used Japan as a staging base for its military and UN operations in Korea. What did that mean for Japan? Money, a lot of it. The US spent over $3.5 billion on special procurements from Japan between 1950 and 1954. Japanese factories were suddenly in full gear, producing steel, transport vehicles, machinery, and even military uniforms. The result? Industrial production more than doubled in just 1 year. This war-driven demand brought in massive foreign exchange revenue and supercharged Japan's recovery. It wasn't peace that boosted Japan, it was war. But a strong economy isn't built just on aid and wartime contracts. For real, long-term growth, you need smart systems in place. Between 1949 and 1952, Japan started building the backbone of its future economy. This is where planning, policy, and partnerships came in. First, they formed MITI. It worked directly with industries to guide production, encourage technology imports, boost exports, and make companies more efficient. Then came the Japan Development Bank and PHIL. These gave cheap, long-term loans to key industries, helping them grow faster without depending on risky private capital. And here's something most people don't realize. US experts trained Japanese executives. Through programs like USTANP, they visited MIT, IBM, and learned modern business practices like quality control from people like W. Edwards Deming and Joseph Juran. This mix of smart planning, funding, and training led to a big jump in industries like electronics, Sony, Panasonic, cars, Toyota, Nissan, steel, and shipbuilding. Japan didn't reinvent the wheel. They just adopted the best tools out there and used them wisely. But even with strong industries and smart planning, one question remained. What about defense? Japan's new post-war constitution banned it from having a military to settle disputes. So instead of building a big army, Japan made a smart deal. Under what's now called the Yoshida Doctrine, Japan let the US handle its defense. In return, Japan kept its defense spending low, just around 1% of GDP, and focused all its energy on building its economy. In 1951, the US-Japan Security Treaty was signed and took effect in 1952. This treaty allowed American military bases to stay in Japan, giving protection without the cost of a full military. This freed up money for schools, roads, factories, and technology. Japan didn't just grow, it grew fast because it didn't have to split resources between guns and growth. Now that Japan had internal stability, strong industries, and security, it needed just one more thing to truly rise: access to the world market. In the 1950s, the US allowed Japanese goods to enter its markets, giving Japan a chance to earn from exports. Then, in 1955, the US even helped Japan join GATT, the global trade system that reduced tariffs and encouraged international business. Between 1958 and 1960, Japanese exports to the US jumped by over 150%. For the first time, Japan had a trade surplus. It was selling more than it was buying. Even more interesting, the US didn't stop Japan from using protectionist policies at home. Japan was allowed to control imports, promote its own exports, and license foreign tech, all with tight planning through MITI. This gave Japan the freedom to grow its own champions, industries that would later conquer global markets. With everything in place, aid, reforms, institutions, trade, and security, Japan had all the ingredients for something incredible. From 1953 to 1965, Japan's economy exploded with growth. GDP increased by about 9% per year, and industries grew even faster. By the mid-1960s, Japan had already passed West Germany and Italy, and by 1968, it became the second largest economy in the world. This wasn't luck. It was the result of US strategic support that turned Japan into a funded, secure ally, strong economic reforms like the Dodge Plan and tax restructuring, powerful institutions like MITI, the Development Bank, and finally technology transfer and expert training from American companies, open access to US and world markets, low military spending. So more money went into factories, roads, and schools. This was the so-called Japanese economic miracle, a story of rapid recovery, smart planning, and global cooperation. It's time for Fact Say Confidence Score. So, why did the US fund Japan's future? Well, part of it was humanitarian. After the atomic bombings and the war, people were starving. Helping was the right thing to do. But it wasn't just that. It was also about strategy. The Cold War was heating up, and America wanted a strong, capitalist ally in Asia, someone to push back against Soviet and Chinese influence. There was money in it too. Japan became a customer for US goods. A stable, growing Japan meant fewer problems, more trade, and a long-term partner. And with the US-Japan Security Treaty and Japan giving up its military power, America locked in a friendship for decades. So here's the question for you. Was this a smart move by the US? Or was Japan just lucky to be in the right place at the right time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.